We need to gather anything we can use to help with the filtration system, Emily instructed. And we need volunteers to monitor the situation with Ben. We can't let him go, but we need to keep him safe until we understand how to treat him. With newfound resolve, the townspeople sprang into action. Some ran to collect water filtration materials from the local supply store, while others prepared makeshift restraints for Ben. Emily turned her attention back to him, kneeling beside the restrained farmer. Ben, if you can hear me, we're going to help you. I promise. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by the feral glint. The virus was still in control, and she felt a deep pang of sadness for the man he once was. As the task force began to mobilize, Emily coordinated efforts, her adrenaline fueling her focus. They set up a central filtration area in the town hall, where they could ensure safe drinking water for everyone. Meanwhile, they established a rotation for monitoring Ben. A small group of volunteers would stay with him, ready to respond if he became violent. Emily felt a sense of urgency. They had to contain the situation while searching for answers about the virus and its origins. Joan, can you help me gather more samples from Ben? Emily asked. We need to analyze his blood to understand how the virus is affecting him. Of course, Joan replied, her voice steady despite the fear swirling around them. We'll figure this out together. With their plan in place, they carefully extracted a small blood sample from Ben using a sterilized needle. Emily's heart raced as she labeled the vial, knowing that this could hold the key to unlocking the mystery of the virus. Back in her makeshift lab, Emily set to work immediately, running tests on Ben's blood alongside the water samples she had collected. Each moment felt like an eternity, her mind racing with possibilities. As she examined the results, she noticed a disturbing pattern. The virus in Ben's blood was more aggressive than what she had found in the water supply. This meant that the viral strain affecting the townspeople might be mutating or spreading differently, intensifying the symptoms and aggression. Joan, I need you to take a look at this, she called, motioning for her to come closer. The virus seems to be evolving. It's adapting to its hosts faster than I anticipated. Joan leaned over the microscope, her brow furrowing as she absorbed the data. So, it's not just about the water supply. There's something else at play. Emily said, her voice filled with urgency. If we don't understand how it's evolving, exactly, we won't be able to contain it effectively. We need to find out where this started. Fueled by a sense of urgency, Emily and Joan began researching potential sources of contamination in Pine Hollow. They combed through public records, looking for recent changes in agricultural practices or any industrial activities that could have introduced the virus into the ecosystem. Hours turned into days, and the strain of their investigation weighed heavily on them. As they pored over data, they discovered a troubling trend. The nearby farms had recently increased pesticide usage in an attempt to combat an invasive species that had devastated their crops. That's it, Emily exclaimed, her heart racing. The pesticides, they must have interacted with the water supply, creating the perfect environment for the virus to mutate. Joan nodded, her face pale with realization. If that's true, we need to warn the farmers and anyone else using the contaminated water immediately. With a plan in place, Emily gathered the task force once again, informing them of their findings. The townspeople listened intently, their expressions a mixture of fear and determination. We need to contact the farmers and anyone else who might be affected by the water supply, Emily urged. We have to warn them about the virus and the dangers of the contaminated water. Mark stepped forward, determination etched on his face. I'll rally the farmers. They need to know the risks before more people get hurt. As the group split into teams, Emily felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She knew that every moment counted. If the virus continued to spread unchecked, they would be facing an even greater disaster. Mark quickly organized a small team to reach out to the local farmers. They gathered contact information and split up to deliver the urgent message. Emily watched as they drove off, hoping they would convey the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, she turned to the remaining townsfolk. "We need to set up a community meeting again, but this time we'll focus on safety measures and gathering information. Everyone needs to be aware of the symptoms and what to do if they notice anything unusual." Joan, standing beside her, nodded. "We should also distribute flyers with instructions for how to filter water at home until we can establish a safe supply." As they quickly drafted a flyer detailing the symptoms of infection and safety protocols, the atmosphere in the town hall shifted. Fear was still present, but it was now tinged with a sense of purpose. They were ready to fight back. That evening, they held a community meeting, and the hall was packed with anxious townspeople. Emily stood at the front, flanked by Joan and Mark, who had returned from their outreach efforts. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady despite the anxious energy in the room. "I know this is a frightening time, but we need to unite as a community to face this threat together." She outlined the findings about the virus, emphasizing the importance of recognizing symptoms and filtering water. As she spoke, she could see the fear in the eyes of her neighbors transforming into determination. "I need everyone to remain vigilant. If you notice any changes in behavior in yourself or your family, please come to us immediately. We can help, but we need to know who is affected." A murmur spread through the crowd as people exchanged worried glances. Joan stepped forward, holding up the flyers. "We've put together some guidelines on how to filter water safely at home. Please take one and share it with your neighbors." As the meeting concluded, Emily felt a surge of adrenaline. She knew that while they had made progress, the situation was still volatile. They needed to prepare for potential escalations. "We should set up a central command center," she suggested to Joan and Mark after the meeting. "A place where we can coordinate our efforts, share information, and monitor the situation with those infected." Mark nodded, his expression resolute. "I can set up a space in the old community center. It has the room we need for supplies and meetings." "Great idea," Emily replied. "We'll also need to establish a communication network, perhaps a phone tree, so that everyone can stay updated quickly." As they worked late into the night to organize their plans, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. The community was coming together, and they were ready to confront the threat head-on. The next day, they set up the command center at the community center, transforming it into a hub of activity. Townsfolk volunteered to help organize supplies and spread the word about safety measures. Emily felt the urgency pressing upon her as they established a protocol for dealing with suspected cases of infection. Volunteers were trained to monitor those showing symptoms and to ensure that they received the help they needed without causing panic. Every day brought new challenges, but as they implemented safety measures, Emily saw the community rallying together. The fear that had once paralyzed them was giving way to a fierce determination to protect one another. As the days passed, Emily and her team continued to monitor the situation closely. They set up regular meetings to discuss updates, and volunteers reported any unusual behavior they noticed in their neighbors. However, not everyone was willing to accept the reality of the situation. Some townsfolk remained in denial, refusing to believe that their friends and family could be infected. Emily felt a pang of frustration each time she encountered skepticism, but she reminded herself that fear could lead people to act irrationally. One afternoon, As Emily was reviewing data from the water filtration system, Joan burst into the room, her face pale. "Emily, you need to come quickly. It's Ben. He's breaking free." Emily's heart raced as she followed Joan to the main area of the community center. There, she found a chaotic scene unfolding. Ben had somehow managed to loosen his restraints, and several volunteers were struggling to contain him. "Get back," Mark shouted, using a chair to keep Ben at bay. The once familiar farmer was now a terrifying figure, snarling and thrashing against the people trying to help him. "Ben, please," Emily shouted, pushing her way through the crowd. "We're here to help you." For a moment, his wild eyes locked onto hers, and she could see a flicker of recognition. But it was quickly overtaken by the